Welcome back to Pathway to Employment. I'm here to help you get a job or have a better chance of getting a job. You know, this job market is tough, and you have to have the tools to get you not only in the door, but once you're in the door for an interview, to succeed. And so today we're going to be talking about interviewing, and not just talking about it, but we're going to actually practice it. I have interview questions, and I'm going to give you some answers that would be really good to use. But before we do that, a couple quick things. So, first of all, in this step of interviewing, you have to know what you're going to say. You know, I know it can be nerve-wracking to interview. I've done it myself. But when you do, you're wanting to know what you're going to say. You don't have to sound practiced. You don't have to sound rehearsed. In fact, you don't want to. But you do want to know what you're going to say. And so to do that, what you want to do is practice. Have someone help you if you have someone that can help you. Practice for the interview and what you're going to say. Go over, 10, 15 questions and have them do a mock interview. And that's kind of what we're going to do today. Also, have your 30-second snapshot ready. You know, something that you know, especially when they ask that question that happens so often about tell us about you. What is so special about you, or what can you offer to this company? You want to be able to answer that. So we're going to talk about all that today and have questions that you should know you're wanting to ask. You always want to ask questions when they say, do you have any questions you want to ask us? Don't say, no, I don't have any questions. You need to have questions. And just 4, 5, 6 questions would be fine. Also, make sure that your first impression is a good one, that you come across as likable, and that you come across as capable. So let's talk about some of the questions that might come up and what are some good possible answers. So first of all, one that I like a lot, and I'm going to go over some questions that I like to ask. Tell me something I don't see on your resume that you think it's important for people to know about you. So that question gets at a lot of things, and sometimes it throws people off a little. It's not meant to. But if somebody were to ask you that, what would you say? I'll tell you what might be good to say, or some things that might be good to say. You know, you might say something like, well, some of the things that's important to know about me, and by the way, don't talk about your personal life in this question. At least don't make that your whole answer. If you say some things about your personal life, that's okay at the very beginning, but make sure you bring it back to the professional part. And make sure you say, I am very into making things quality, like quality products, or integrity. Is very important to me, and give an example why on each of these. So this is just a couple things you could throw out for that. Family is important to me, which can lead to other things. So again, if you say something that's personal, bring it to the professional somehow. It's really important that you use this question to show what is important about you. And that's really, if you don't know that, then they're not going to know that. Because again, you have to be your best spokesperson. Another one is, what type of work environment are you most effective in? Now, one that's used a lot, and I think it's actually a good one, is a collaborative work environment. And give examples again of why. Why does that work best for you? You're a team player. Now, make sure you don't use too many kind of cliche terms, but they're also, when you look at something that could be looked at as cliche, but it's also a key word. Now, we're past the resume stage, so it's not quite as urgent, but it's still good to get those things in on questions and answers. So talk about the environment that you flourish in. You know, you can say, I prefer to not be micromanaged because I'm an independent person, but I also work well as a team. So those are just some possible answers. Another question I like to ask is, what do you consider your most proud personal accomplishment? Or it could be job related again. Just proud. I usually leave out the word personal and just say your accomplishment you're most proud of, or one of them. And so it's really important to, again, now this one I think could be personal. If you've achieved something in your life, and I tell people that when I ask it, this could be a personal one or it could be professional. So if there's something in your life that you've achieved and you really want to highlight that and it makes people understand the kind of person you are, please do use that. If it's a professional thing, that's fine too. You can give an example of something you're really proud that you accomplished at work at one of your jobs. Remember, it doesn't always have to be just your very last job. It can be a job or two ago. It's not important as much what job it was as to what it was. And then one question I absolutely always ask in an interview is, how would you rate your interest level in this job on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being most interested? Now, you don't always have to say 5. That's okay. You may not know enough, and that's a fair answer, and I hear that a lot. People will say 4 because, I'm still learning about the job and I'd like to know more and I have some questions. And so then that can lead to the questions, or they can come later. You can say 4.5. You can actually say 5. I don't really suggest saying over 5 because the interview just told you on a scale of 1 to 5. So you go beyond that, it kind of seems like maybe a little fake, or a little you're pushing the boundaries in a not a good way. But that's up to you. I just would rather in that case stick with what they gave me. One thing that could make it seem like is you don't follow instructions. So my suggestion is to not do that. But it's totally fine to say 5, give 2 or 3 reasons why, because this is the environment, from what I understand, that I really enjoy working in. The mission of the organization, for instance, if it's a nonprofit that has a mission, or the work that I used to work for a pharmaceutical company that made important drugs for rare diseases. Well, something like that is easy to attribute to your interest in working with that company. So those are the kind of things you should say in that question. What are 2 challenges you like and look forward to in this job? So, we've talked about the job, hopefully in a phone interview, and now in this interview, and you've learned and you're still learning, but the interview is asking you, challenges, keep in mind, challenges are a good thing. Challenges are not bad, and it doesn't mean you couldn't do it. It just means it's more challenging than other aspects of the job. And so with that in mind, if I ask you, what 2 challenges do you look forward to? One could be, for example, learning a new skill, or leading a new department, or, doing a new responsibility, having that new responsibility that you haven't had before. So all kind of leaning towards something new, because a lot of times people say, why are you leaving your job? And they say, I want a new challenge. Well, hook that in with this question as to what's a challenge you're looking forward to. So just a few examples. Another one could be learning this business, because unless they've worked in a very similar place, it's bound to be new. There are bound to be new things. So, sometimes people can't think of challenges, and the worst answer you can give here is, I see no challenges. Well, if you see no challenges, well, first of all, you must be walking on water, and secondly, it's going to be boring. That's what it's going to seem like. Well, then you're going to be bored in this job, possibly. So don't ever answer that way in a question like that. Tell them what will challenge you. Another thing you could say is that there are parts of this job I've done, but this builds on that, and so I look forward to building on my previous experience. All those are really good answers for that, except the one that I told you not to use. How do you communicate with someone you need to talk to that isn't in your facility, like in the same building? Obviously you have more than one site in your company in this case, the question assumes. Well, in this day and age, that's easy, actually. This question is an easy one, but people sometimes, flub it up because they try to overthink it. There are things like Teams, there is instant messaging and so forth that you can use, and you can also call someone. People's phones still work. So sometimes when it's really important and you need to find something out, pick up the phone and call. Also email, of course, text messaging, etc. Now I'm going to move to some of these other questions that are considered some of the toughest interview questions by Passport to Employment, who I worked with 6 years ago, and they got me on my pathway to employment where I am today. So again, the famous tell me about yourself. Sometimes people just don't know what to say. They haven't practiced. That's the key. You have to practice. And you want that 30-second infomercial about yourself in your mind. You don't have to recite it word for word. I don't advise that. But what you do want to do is you want to have it ready, the information, and be able to tell people. And feel free to customize it a bit as you're saying it. You know, I have a community theater background, and that comes in really handy in some of these things, but not everybody has that. So that's why practice is important, and really thinking ahead of time. Don't leave these questions up to fate as to what they're going to ask, and try to think of some of the questions and come up with answers ahead of time in your mind. You can also have notes, but you certainly don't want to be reading from a script or reading from notes. So you're mostly taking notes during an interview, but that can help you answer questions later. What is your greatest weakness? Now, I don't ask this question. I don't like saying it that way. I ask, what's something you could improve on? Because we can all improve on something, and I put it that way. And so what I tell people is, you know, when you're thinking about this, think of something that's kind of innocuous, like it's not going to sound really bad. So you don't want to say, well, I'm really bad working with others. You know, you don't want to say something that's really awful like that. Even if it's true, I mean, if you really want the job, sometimes you can't be 100% true. Focus on what is true. And so something like, a lot of times people will say, you know, I have trouble telling people no to additional work. That, I'm a little tired of hearing that one, but you can say that. Also things like, I need to learn such and such computer program or more about it. I've learned some, I've used it some. That to me is one of the best ones to say to this question, is a skill that you could learn, or a program or something like that that you want to learn more about. I'm good at it, but I want to be great at it. Something like that really gets the point across, that it's not so negative, it's just this is something I could improve on. Why should I hire you? Or why are you what I tend to ask is, why are you the best candidate for this particular job? So you have to have, 2, 3, 4 reasons. And don't just say because, I love the mission, or I really want to do this work. Okay, well, so does everyone who comes to the interview. So you have to set yourself apart. You can say, because I have 5 years of experience, for instance, in this particular field. Or I have experienced this myself, and so I can identify with your clients. For a manufacturing job, they may say, I worked for another organization that did a very similar type of manufacturing, and so I have a lot of knowledge in this area. So those are some of the things you could say to something like that. Also, how do you explain a gap in employment? So occasionally we do have gaps in employment. When I was unemployed, I had a few months in between one recent time, about 6 years ago. I had a temporary job that I did for about 5-6 weeks. But other than that, and I had, pretty much from February to April where I wasn't working. And what I was able to say was, due to some financial situations that I had, I was able to take a few months off and focus on the job search and really try to enhance what I was going to do in the future and take the time that was necessary to do that. You can also say, something like, I needed a new challenge. We mentioned that earlier, because I was burnt out. I don't think it's a bad thing to say you were a bit burnt out. It's not my number one reason for answering, or way to answer this question, but I think you can say that and be honest, and it shows some vulnerability. You can also say that this job is the next step in the progression. Like for me, I went from a team of HR people to a department of one, and so I was going to be running the department, obviously, because nobody else was there, and also learning to be the leader of the department. That was new. I also moved from from for-profit to non-for-profit, and that was something else I learned. So there's so many things that you can say there that would be really in your favor. You know, the bottom line in an interview is to sell yourself and to be the best spokesperson for you, because you have to have your questions ready. And speaking of questions, there's a few questions I want to just mention as we finish today. And this is questions you want to ask. So, for instance, you should know who you're going to be reporting to, and you should know who they might be reporting to you, of course. So that's sort of a given. But, you know, ask about challenges. Ask about what they faced recently and what might be in your future if you have the job. Also, you want to ask about what are things that you think the qualities are that you're looking for someone in this job, for this job. And, you know, those are some questions. Others might be, you know, why is this job open? I would tend to stay away from that. They may tell you. I think I usually try to tell people why the job is open. But, you know, keep in mind, interviewing is your time to shine. It's your time to brag on yourself. Some people say, oh, I don't want to brag on myself, and then they say something else after that. Well, this is the time. If no other time to brag about yourself, an interview is that time. So I hope this has helped. We'll be continuing to talk about interviewing as we go on to the next video. But the next video is also going to focus on job offers, getting the offer, possibly negotiating for maybe a better salary, and what do you do to prepare. Also, one other quick note. If you have a second or third interview that you know will be coming up once you find out, you want to prepare a 30, 60, 90-day template of what you can offer that company. And we'll talk about that in the next video as well. So take care, everyone, and have the best you can do on your path to employment with these tools. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.